Today on the Huddle, it's NFL Conference Championship week. Only 3 games in the NFL season left to go. Me and Tony break down the weekend ahead and have 6 picks from the 2 games. Meanwhile, I'm still reeling from the James Cook bad beat. Time to huddle, folks. Let's go. Welcome to the Huddle, everybody. Episode 18. That's right. Only 3 NFL games remaining. We were talking a bit about this off camera before we hit record, Tony, but sort of a bittersweet time of the season. Like, it's exciting that we're this deep into the playoffs, but 3 games left, man.
Yeah, it's tough to get excited about the end of the year coming. Of course, us being 49er fans, Super Bowl's around the corner, extremely exciting. But that football offseason is tough. You got the draft to break things up a little bit, but really the offseason in football, you're just, especially like August rolls around, you start getting into the preseason games, you're just begging for it. And we're almost to that time of year. So bittersweet's a really great way to put it, Andrew.
Bittersweet indeed. Also bittersweet. We had a great run of shows with our picks. We were on a bit of a tear, I'll say. I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school there. 1-5 in the divisional round. And honestly, dude, I had maybe, you'll have to refresh my memory if I'm incorrect here, but probably the worst beat of our run in the Huddle so far, which was James Cook over on his rushing yards, 62.5 I had. He has 67 going into the fourth quarter. Then he has runs of -3 and -4 and 0 and finishes under the total, man. I was so raging.
Absolutely brutal. So you noticed that live. You were watching that sort of happen live.
Yeah, I thought it was a wrap.
Oh, that is brutal. That's an all-timer, man. That's absolutely brutal. It's funny, you kind of called me out last week on the emotional hedge for the Packers 49ers, and the Packers got inside the 10 on that plus 270 bet. And so I'm just it was very emotionally hedgy. I was very split on having my money versus my team early in the game. You kind of like start playing tricks with yourself. You're like, well, the 49ers can come back from 7-0, no problem. Maybe I should be rooting for this. Interesting situation there for sure.
Yeah, for those that didn't watch our divisional round show, Tony had Packers first drive resulting in a touchdown, and obviously they settled with a field goal. But what was that, plus 270?
Plus 270. Yeah.
Plus 270.
Worth a shot.
Definitely worth a shot. And yeah, they were knocking on the door, just couldn't get it in. I want to talk real quick here. One of the things that has been all over social media, whether it's X or whether it's TikTok or whatever, all season, and not just this season, it's been the past few, but it's the theory of NFL script writers. And there was a little bit of a story that everybody that believes in the NFL scriptwriters was hanging their hat on. I believe it was a news outlet in Canada, I think in BC or something. They ran something on the ticker at the bottom. It was like, Post Malone, Reba McEntire will be performing at the Super Bowl when the San Francisco 49ers face the Baltimore Ravens. So, of course, this goes off like wildfire around social media, and people are like, oh my God, see? Tony, do you put any stock in that, or is that just some dude coming up with those graphics that maybe he's a Niners fan, or maybe he knows that this is something going around social media and was like, I'm going to have a little fun here?
Yeah, I put 0 stock in it. I wonder if it was like a placeholder, you know what I mean? Like someone was like putting the graphic up, like you said, and either intentionally did it because they're a 49er or a Ravens fan just to be funny or goofy, someone on their last day of work, or like it was a placeholder in the script. I'm surprised nobody's like reached out to that news organization to ask them, for an explanation, but it is funny. And when you combine it with what we talked about on a previous show about the logo controversy with the Ravens purple and the 49ers red the last couple of years, but I put no stock in that, of course. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, I think the whole scriptwriters thing started with Arian Foster on that podcast, where he very sarcastically and facetiously, but if you don't know Arian Foster, convincingly makes the case that he was given a script as a player, and that spread like wildfire. And I think that's really when I started hearing the whole script thing. There's always been allegations that the NFL's rigged and stuff before that, but the use of the word script, I think, kind of started there with that Arian Foster's. Is that your perspective too?
There were little bits of rumblings and sort of, breadcrumb trail of real tinfoil hat people that had gone into it. But I think the mainstream was the Arian Foster appearance on whatever podcast that was. I was thinking about it earlier this morning. I can't remember. But definitely that's the one where it's like, oh my God, see, we told you, or, whatever the case may be. On that note, are there any sort of sports conspiracy theories that you buy into?
Certainly there are. I think the Patrick Ewing NBA draft from a while ago. I've reviewed that clip of the envelope getting tossed into the bin, and it seems very intentional the way that it's chucked in there. So that's one of the more popular ones that you can get me on board with. The lights going out, the 49ers Ravens stadium. If I had to wager on this one, I'd say it probably wasn't a conspiracy, but I'm not like 100% closed off to it just because the NFL is a big money-making machine. Not the conspiracy that it was done to help the 49ers, but maybe you're like losing ratings somehow. Maybe people are losing interest and it's going to, get you more advertising. I'm open to something with that. But just because I've watched a million football games and never seen the lights go out, it was such a weird thing that I'm like, that was odd.
Very bizarre. I certainly buy into the Ewing one as well. I've got a few for you. Let me know what you think about this.
All right.
So I believe any report of an injury, like a player hurting himself sneezing or, pulling a muscle, doing something, I think that's a direct cover-up. So, I believe there's potentially something a bit more nefarious when it comes to that kind of story, like massive hangovers or somebody got into a bar fight and that's why his eye is black. He didn't open the door on himself or anything like that. But I think anything like flu-like symptoms, clearly that player is hungover. What do you think about that one?
All right, let's get into this, Andrew, because I'm with you on this 100%. Have you thought of this angle? Something nefarious, something that they weren't supposed to be doing in their contract. A lot of these guys have contracts that say you can't drive, you can't go, cliff jumping, or you shouldn't be roller skating, or you shouldn't be riding your boat out in the water, or whatever, to keep them safe. You shouldn't be bungee jumping, whatever. So if they did that activity and don't want to lose money in their contract or rat themselves out, the agent is going to help them come up with a story so that they don't end up losing money, getting fired, etc. So 100% on that one. Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's my second one. This is a bit of a deep dive but baseball fans will know what I'm talking about here. There's a theory out there. You remember the 1986 World Series, Mets, Red Sox? It's the Bill Buckner game.
Wasn't watching it because I was too young, but I know of it for sure growing up a Red Sox fan. Yep.
There's a theory that the only reason Bill Buckner was still on the field instead of the defensive substitute backup first baseman was because then Red Sox manager John McNamara wanted Buckner to be in all the celebratory photos when the Red Sox ultimately won the game. But we know what happened. Mookie Wilson hits a dribbler down the first baseline. It goes between Buckner's legs, and the rest, of course, is history. The Mets go on and win the whole thing. Very, very, that's super tinfoil hatty, but I love the notion that is the thing, and that's why Buckner was old. His knees were bad. He shouldn't have been on the field. They had a better backup first baseman glove on the bench there that they didn't throw in. So that's an interesting one. And then,
well, hold up. I'm not going to get on board with that one until I need more motive. You know what I mean? Like this is a cold case we're trying to solve here. Did he have beef? Did the manager have beef with that defensive first baseman and he didn't want him in the photo? Did he have a soft spot for Buckner for some reason? Because
I would say because Buckner was such late in his career, a guy that was a great hitter in the game throughout the 70s and 80s. And I think that the theory is that he just wanted him to be on the field. You know, grounded to first, he catches the ball. He's the guy with the ball and throws his hands up, jumping in the air, celebrating. I think McNamara just wanted him out there to be in all of those famous shots. But instead, it was the Mets that got all those famous photographs from the '86 World Series, one of the best of all time.
All right.
Then there's this one. So from the 1998 World Cup final, the Brazilian superstar Ronaldo was not included in the starting lineup. He was by far the best player at that tournament, probably the biggest star in the game. It had since come out that he had convulsions in his hotel room the night before and spent hours at a hospital. But Nike, who had thrown $50 million or whatever the case behind the Brazil national team, forced him to play in that World Cup final, which is a bigger conversation about sponsorship money impacting personnel decisions in that regard. What do you think about that?
Wow, this is one I'm not familiar with at all, and I want to go down an internet rabbit hole and check this one out now and read all I can about it. That is fascinating. That it makes sense to me that he would have pressure to play when people have bought tickets and advertising revenue and all that, and they're expecting him to play. I can see that. That's fascinating. I want to go down a rabbit hole on that one.
It would be akin to, like, in this past World Cup final, Argentina, if Messi mysteriously out of the starting lineup card an hour before the game. People were going crazy. I actually remember it quite well. I don't buy into the NFL scriptwriters, of course. I think it's a bunch of people having some fun, but it is very interesting. Like, it blew up when that little story came out over the weekend.
Andrew, are you familiar with the Bucs Raiders Super Bowl conspiracy theory?
No, I am not, but I remember that Super Bowl quite well.
All right, so there's a lot going on here. One, there are some prominent former NFL players who 100% buy it. And of course, they're on the Raiders because the Raiders lost. I could be misspeaking here. I want to say Tim Brown is a proponent of this conspiracy theory. There's the whole John Gruden coaching against his former team. And when you see like the NFL clips from those games, like people are mic'd up and stuff, like the NFL films, like the defensive players are like, this is crazy. It's exactly what we were told was going to happen. And so there's a theory out there that the Super Bowl was kind of thrown. And then you've got the whole, remember, was it Barrett Robbins? Was he the center for the Raiders who like went missing a couple days before the Super Bowl? It was like this really bizarre scenario.
Wow, I remember that. Yeah.
Yep. And so apparently, I haven't dug into this in years, so my details here are going to be a little fuzzy. But what I think I remember from it was that the entire game plan for the Raiders changed like 2 days before the game. So you've got the Super Bowl prep, like this is what we're going to do. We're going to run the ball, make sure you're, looking for play action, et cetera. And then apparently the whole offensive script, the game plan shifted and the players were like, what? You're changing the game plan a couple days before the game? This is insane. If I remember correctly, and if I wasn't reading misinformation on the internet, I'm pretty sure this is a conspiracy theory that several players buy into and believe.
I had not heard that one, and Steve, our sort of producer behind the scenes, just got in my ear. He said Bill Callahan changed the offensive playbook or play script on the Friday before Super Bowl Sunday. I had not heard that before. Right. This is new to me.
All right. At the very least, let's say it's not a conspiracy and he just thought that was going to give him a competitive advantage, right? Like, that's possible. Is in it something that we should be talking about, that a coach made a terrible decision like that? Like, shouldn't that at least be debated? To me, that makes it more likely that there is a conspiracy. It's like, why aren't we at least discussing this? Andrew, you're a huge sports fan. Why have you and so many other sports fans not heard about this? I didn't hear about it until years after the Super Bowl. That makes it a little more sketchy. That it seems like there's maybe a cover-up or something.
That's the best one. Saving the best for last. That's crazy. And you know what? We're going to have our boy Ryan Hogue on next week. We got to ask him about that because I know he's closely aligned to those that era of Raiders football. So we'll have to get his thoughts on that. That's a good one, man. And then there's, of course, I fully buy into the Michael Jordan left the NBA because of, gambling and this, that, and the other thing. That's obviously a popular one, but I'm fully on board on that one as well. Want to get into
that one? I think I'm on the fence there. I'm open to that one though.
Oh yeah, for sure. Want to get into obviously the two big games coming up this weekend, but let's talk a little bit about the weekend that was. Some crazy games. The official team of the Huddle, the Houston Texans, really did sort of give the Baltimore Ravens a bit of a scare in that first half. Played really well. They were keeping it close. But then the second half happens. They get outscored 24-0. The Ravens easily covering the number, of course. So if anyone had a big statement in the divisional round, it was the Baltimore Ravens, right? Like that was, to me, a statement game.
Yeah, absolutely. What really stuck out to me is that the Texans just could not run the ball at all. They had no running game. And, you know, I'm going to make excuses for CJ Stroud here. It's tough to do much when the entire offense is on your shoulders. I mean, they couldn't rip off 5 or 6 yard runs. I mean, it seemed like every single time the guy was getting tackled in the backfield or running for a 1 yard gain with no holes whatsoever. So that was concerning. But it's funny how you have these teams off of a bye, 49ers and Ravens. And I think people for that week, because of recency bias, kind of forget how good those teams are. And then there's the hype around the hot wildcard team, right? And I'm guilty of this because I love the Texans all season and I had the Texans to cover. I think we can forget, you know what, those number one seeds, they deserve that for a reason. Reminds me a little bit, do you remember last year in the playoffs, the Giants barely squeezed into the playoffs.
Yep.
They beat the Vikings, who really weren't anything special. The Vikings were kind of a paper tiger. Their record was really misleading. And then there were people making arguments that, the Giants are going to beat the Eagles in the second round because they've got this divisional familiarity, and the Eagles just smoked them. Like, this scenario kind of reminded me a little bit of that with this Ravens-Texans game a bit.
Yeah, big time, but definitely impressive. And then, of course, they move on. Elsewhere on Saturday, nervy one for our 49ers. Pair of touchdowns from CMC. Lost Debo. Brock, not at his best, but potentially a bit unfairly hated on for his performance. Kittle was great. Major props for Juwan Jennings and Dre Greenlaw. Nervy one. What did you make of that one?
Yeah, way closer than I imagined, a little bit lower scoring than I imagined. The weather impacted Brock more than I thought it was going to, but we also saw him struggle in the rain against the Browns earlier this year. So I think this is something to keep an eye on. It looks like we're going to have clear weather in San Francisco, by the way, this weekend. But I always talk about, like, Jared Goff in the rain. You want to fade that guy. And in terms of, betting under the team total, under his player props, etc. And you may need to start thinking about Brock Purdy in the same way when there's rain. It looks like it's not going to be a problem for the rest of this season because the Super Bowl is going to be indoors and the 49ers have good weather for this weekend. But going forward in Brock Purdy's career, it's something to watch. I mean, you saw that one clip. Did you see that, Andrew, where he actually wiped his hand in the middle of the play after the snap? He took his hand off the ball and wiped his hand to dry it. So it was clear that was impacting him. But when it mattered most on that last drive, I mean, he was lights out. He hit Chris Conley for like a 20. What's the last time anybody's ever heard that guy's name? Like 25-yard catch, I think, ish. Juwan Jennings was clutch on third down. I mean, it was impressive, all the different receivers he hit on that last drive without Deebo Samuel on the field.
For 3 seasons, Juwan Jennings repeatedly, comes up in big spots, and he makes those big catches. I love this guy. Love watching him play. Speaking of the Lions, I thought my Bucs spread was going to cash, but the Lions, of course, obviously pulled away in that one. But talk to me about, at the end of the game, a little bit of some rumblings about the clock management toward the end of that one. What did you make of that whole situation?
Yeah, so for people who aren't familiar, and I think there are a lot of people out there who aren't familiar about this, the Lions kind of gaffed big time. Not kind of, big gaff. Goff kneeled too early. And long story short, he left too much time on the clock to a point where if Todd Bowles had called a timeout, he would have forced the Lions to kick a field goal, like almost 50-yard field goal, over 45-yard field goal, which is no gimme in the playoffs, right?
No.
And if that field goal was missed, granted without timeouts, the Bucs would have had an opportunity with a little tiny bit of time on the clock to throw a couple Hail Marys, go down the field, and they'd need the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. I've had this debate with a lot of people, and a lot of people are like, it was the end of the game anyways. And guys, it's the playoffs. Even if there's a sliver of a chance, you need to do everything you can. You owe it to your fans. You owe it to the players that have been working their butts off all year. And so to me, it was a head scratcher from Todd Bowles. He said in the press conference that the most mind-blowing thing, he said that like this wasn't an etiquette thing, that he's just like, yeah, there just wasn't a lot of time. And I'm like, that answer's not acceptable.
The game was over. The game's over. So ridiculous, man.
If he used the etiquette excuse and he's like, listen, you don't understand, Tony. There's this unwritten rule in football. It would have been really bad to do that. I still wouldn't agree, but I'd be like, okay, I can at least see his line of thinking. The answer he gave, I'm just like, come on. No, not good.
Yeah, really bizarre. And then the last game, of course, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs once again over the Buffalo Bills in the postseason. Are the Buffalo Bills just flat out cursed? Like, is there a more cursed franchise in professional sports than this team? Listen to this. This was tweeted by OptaStats after the game. So the Bills both rushed and passed for over 180 yards, 0 giveaways and took 0 sacks, under 30 penalty yards, over 35-minute time of possession, had 5 separate 10-play drives. Quote, no other NFL team in the Super Bowl era has done all this in the same game and still ended up losing.
That hurts. What you've got to love about the Bills is the memes that have come out afterwards. I don't know if you've seen the ones that I've seen, but like I saw one where the end zone was photoshopped. Excuse me, the field goal post was photoshopped to like be way over to the side. Yeah, exactly. And then I saw, I'd never seen this before, but it was a Scott Norwood jersey, and the letters for Norwood started all the way to the right of the jersey on the nameplate on the back.
Amazing.
And so, yeah, the internet is undefeated. You got to love the internet. Going back to your question about are they like the most cursed franchise? Have their fans been teased the most? They're up there. I think the Browns are in consideration as well. And if the Lions hadn't had this run with Dan Campbell the last couple of years, you'd have to throw them up into consideration as well for sure. So I think those would probably be the top 3. But those 4 Super Bowls in a row, that's tough to swallow as a fan.
Well, that's what I was going to say, man. Like growing up, like this team, Thurman Thomas, Jim Kelly, Andre Reed, like just, borderline legendary players, if not legendary, all 3 of those guys and more. I mean, on defense, you had Cornelius Bennett and, whomever else. These were legit, good, fun, exciting teams. But obviously, starting with that Scott Norwood, I think that one, was that the Phil Simms game? Was that against the Giants, his wide right missed field goal? But starting with that one and then losing 4 straight, I don't know, man. Yeah. That's a tough, bitter pill to swallow for those fans. So we've got 4 left standing. Talk to me. I know you've seen some books putting sort of hypothetical Super Bowl matchup lines out there. What have you seen in terms of those hypotheticals?
Well, it's interesting. I saw the 49ers and Ravens hypothetical open up as the 49ers a 1.5 point favorite, which I think surprised a lot of average fans out there. I saw a lot of people on Twitter like scratching their heads and like, I don't get this. The Ravens beat the 49ers. This is on a neutral site. How are the 49ers a favorite here? I think there's a big sentiment out there from bookmakers and from bettors that there was a little bit of luck involved in that game. We talked about it on this show. But the surprising thing for me is that very quickly that line moved from Ravens favored by 1.5 down to a pick'em. And so I think it's mostly sharp bettors. I think a lot of casual bettors aren't even aware that these lines exist. So to me, that tells me that at least some groups of sharp bettors like the Ravens here and brought that line down to a pick'em. The Chiefs 49ers line, the Niners were favored by 3.5. So if you're someone like me who has a big futures position on the 49ers, you're rooting for the Chiefs in this matchup because you've got a better hedge position because you can bet the Chiefs plus 3.5, hit a middle, or bet the Chiefs money line and get more juice out of it that way. But yeah, that was the big takeaway for me, that line on the Ravens moved from 1.5 down to a pick'em.
From Ben Fox, he tweeted this last night. One book has Chiefs -3 against the Lions, total of 50.5. Ravens -4.5 against the Lions, total of 50.5. Niners minus 2.5 over the Chiefs, 46.5 there. And then Niners minus 1 against the Ravens. So some interesting ones, but of course, the dust will settle after the weekend. Let's start with that Chiefs-Ravens game. What are you seeing in that one in terms of weather? I know you alluded to the fact that it might be clear in California there for the Niners game, but anything of note for the AFC game?
Yeah, let me reach over and put my weatherman hat on real quick.
Yep. Is it made of tinfoil?
Exactly. It's looking like about a 50% chance of rain in this game. Winds below 15 mile per hour, like 12 to 15. The 15 to 20 range is really when we start to see, kicks and throws impacted. So it doesn't seem like wind is going to be that big of a deal in this game. The rain doesn't usually affect totals and stuff like that. But we talked about Brock Purdy, how, if the quarterbacks can't grip the ball, that can certainly be a problem. So the weather can change quickly. It's only Wednesday right now as we're taping this, so it's definitely something that bettors want to keep an eye on. If you see those sustained wind up above 20 miles per hour, especially, that's where it's time to start betting the under if the line hasn't already moved at that point. So, Lamar Jackson runs the ball a lot. Lamar Jackson fumbles the ball a lot. People don't talk about Lamar Jackson's fumbling issues, but you add rain to that, and that's interesting. Then on the Chiefs side, we know that their receivers have struggled to catch the ball this year. A lot of drops. Even some of their prominent players like Travis Kelce, we've seen have drops at times this season. And so throwing a little rain in makes that interesting too.
How much stock do you put into NFL referee stats and data and information? Anything at all?
Yeah, it's not really a part of my handicapping. I've seen Warren Sharp had a big tweet this week that got a lot of traction about, this away ref, et cetera, et cetera. I hear handicappers utilize this information. Unless there's a referee who has a really bad reputation of not being good, I will throw that in there as there could be something unexpected that happens because this crew could make a really bad call. But it's not a part of my formula in terms of, this referee calls more pass interference and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is where I was going with that question, was the Warren Sharp thread on X. Sean Smith and crew named to that AFC game. The gist of the thread is that he really favors road teams. A lot of late penalty calls and stuff like that when he is the referee on the field. So just something to consider. Take it with a truckload of salt. The data's out there. It's interesting, but I don't know if I'd hang my hat on it. NFC, obviously, our guys hosting the Lions. I saw our good friend Ben Fox tweet this week. Detroit has played outside just once in the past 12 games, and that was at Chicago back in December. All of their other road games have been indoors. So do you give the Niners a bit more of a home field advantage, taking something like that into account?
Yeah, I do. Like I said, if it was raining, I would take it even more into account. But I give the Niners a little bit more of a home field advantage because it's a playoff game than if this game was played in the regular season, because the stakes are so high and we know these fans are going to be going absolutely nuts hoping that the 49ers get into the Super Bowl. And then the fact that the Lions aren't playing in the comfort of their own home is a big deal for sure. Their offensive line, I've said it all year, is really freaking good. And while they have some injuries up front, it's still overall a well above average unit. When you put an offensive line on the road, it creates more opportunities for things like false starts, things for them not getting off the snap as quickly and stuff like that. So it's a factor in this one for sure. This home field advantage thing is no joke in the playoffs. Niners also have, an extra day of rest here. It's a big advantage for sure.
Yeah, really good in the trenches, really good at stopping the run, Detroit. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. Putting you on the spot here, but what would be the biggest mismatch favoring one team or the other, Niners or Lions? What's the biggest mismatch that can be exploited in this one?
Well, it's funny. A lot of times when I do my handicapping and I look at these games, I try to look at like which unit is the strongest, right? Like, average defense for this team, but this team's offense, they're the difference maker. I think when you're looking at this one, you can say which unit is clearly the weakest, right? 49ers offense, really good. Lions offense, really good. We can debate about which is better, but they're both really good. 49ers defense, really solid. Lions defense is kind of the weak link of all those units. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the 49ers in this passing game. You look at the Lions' performance against quarterbacks recently, they've given up a lot of 300-plus yard passing games, and I think there's going to be room for Brock to work. Also, on top of that, the 49ers defensive line, it doesn't get much better than Javon Kinlaw and Eric Armstead inside in the interior of that defensive line. And Frank Ragnow, I think he's going to play, but Pro Bowl center, banged up knee. We saw him get hurt in the last game. Seems like he kind of gutted his way through that. And then the Lions right guard, his name is escaping me right now, but the Lions right guard is a really crucial part of that offensive line. And before he went out, the Lions gave up no pressures in that game in like 17 or 18 snaps. After he went out, they gave up 7 or 8 pressures. So they're vulnerable in the interior of that offensive line, even though, again, above average line as it stands with the health situation. Going up against that 49ers defensive line, I think that's a potential mismatch there.
Yep, it's going to be very, very interesting. All right, we need a huge bounce back week when it comes to our picks. You're going to go spreads, totals, teasers, whatever you got. I'm on player props because we've only got 2 games to cover here. So take it away. Get us started. Let's go 6-0. What are you looking at for the weekend?
All right, I've got a 6-point teaser for you. I was excited to see that the Chiefs moved from 3.5 up to 4 at a lot of shops. There's still some 3.5s in the market if you're on the other side of this one. But with a 6-point teaser, we're going to move the Chiefs up to +10, 49ers down to -1. So 49ers basically just need to win the game, although you could push on that one leg if they win by 1. This is Patrick Mahomes' time in the playoffs. It's difficult to imagine Patrick Mahomes losing by more than 10 points, so that feels pretty safe there. I like the Chiefs' defensive matchup in this one. The Ravens don't have a lot of guys on offense that scare you. They've got some above average receivers, but nobody that puts fear into your heart. And on the 49ers side in that game, just like I mentioned, that defensive line, I think, can give the Lions trouble in the interior. And Jared Goff is not super mobile. So when you do get that pressure up the middle, that's where you see Jared Goff start to get rattled, throwing interceptions, tipped passes, intentional groundings, things like that. So I'll be looking at that game for our live bettors out there too. See how comfortable Jared Goff looks in that first quarter, and I think that's going to tell you a lot about how the rest of the game is going to look.
From that Chiefs-Ravens game, I'm going to go Rashad Bateman over 23.5 receiving yards. Some modest numbers in the divisional round, but when he was called upon, he did come through. 3 targets, 3 catches for 39 yards in that one. So I think Lamar might lean on him a bit more this weekend. And I like the way this is trending for Bateman and this bet, including that divisional round game. Bateman has eclipsed 23.5 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games, including 54 against Miami, 29 at Jacksonville, 24 against the Rams. And finally, into playoff games, teams are spreading the ball around a bit against this Chiefs defense. The Dolphins had 4 guys above this number on wildcard weekend. The Bills had 3 and would have had another if Diggs could catch the ball. So I'll be looking at Bateman to not necessarily have a big game, but contribute.
I like it. I've got the 49ers here over 51 against the Lions. Total score, of course. You got 2 really good elite play callers. They're going to kind of be emptying their bag, so to speak, to get to the Super Bowl. Got a situation here where both defenses are kind of vulnerable to the other team's offense. The Lions are shaky in their secondary. You can throw deep on them. The 49ers have a deep threat. Brock Purdy, people don't realize it, but he throws a lot of deep passes. And kind of the same thing with the 49ers. We saw Ambry Thomas look pretty shaky last week, cringeworthy at times, kind of panicking when the ball was in the air. And that's something that I think that the Lions could exploit. They certainly have the personnel to exploit in this one. So I like this game going over. It bit me last week. I took the over in the 49er game, and I was mistaken. Although if Dre Greenlaw had ran that touchdown back, that would have affected a lot of people's bank accounts. So anyways, I'm gonna try the over again this week.
That's why I wasn't hitting the dirt. He was doing it for the bettors. Anybody that had the Niners, he was trying to find the house. From that Niners game, I'm looking for George Kittle, anytime touchdown, plus 120. He had a pretty great game against the Packers in the divisional round. 4 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Kittle only had 6 touchdowns in the regular season, and 3 of those came in one game. So the Niners are really going to need everyone, including him, to step up and down the depth chart. And that's regardless if Debo is in or not this weekend. We're recording this early Wednesday morning, so we don't know his status quite yet, but news is supposedly going to come out today. Kittle's going to have to make some plays regardless, and I expect Brock to lean on him in spots. And Otton had a nice game in Tampa Bay's loss against Detroit last week. I suspect that Kittle and the Niners can replicate some of that success in that level against a fairly good Lions defense. Lions allow the 8th most receiving yards to tight ends, tied with the 4th most touchdowns to the position. So I have a feeling that Kittle is going to have a nice little day.
Yeah, before I give you my last pick here, I want to also throw out there, people should consider Deebo Samuel under on his rushing yards prop. If he doesn't play, then obviously you're going to get your money back. The bet's going to be a no action. If he does play, I think it's going to be a situation where the 49ers are trying to protect his shoulder, and they're not going to be giving him a ton of carries. We've seen Deebo Samuel not at 100% in games this season, and we know what that looks like. He's not like forcing contact as he usually does. Him and Kittle are just like looking for guys to hit. And so I think that's a situation where he could play and just have no carries. So something to consider. My last pick here, over 44.5 in the AFC Championship game. I got to be honest, this is really more of a lean. I don't have as much conviction in this one as the other two. My numbers come out and say this total is about right at 44.5. But it's just a situation where my gut is saying, you know what, you've got some elite QBs in this game, in this playoff game. I think we're going to have some points. You got some elite kickers too, by the way. People laugh at me, I think, sometimes because I talk about kickers a lot in my handicapping, but we've seen it this weekend. You had Jake Moody get a kick blocked. You had a kicker miss a field goal. Bill's kicker miss a field goal that could have tied the game late. Kickers are important for handicapping, and you've got 2 of the best kickers in the league, definitely 2 of the best playoff kickers in the league in this one too. That matters. And like I said with the last game, both coaches are going to kind of be emptying their bag. You know, Andy Reid's got some crazy trick play that we haven't seen before, and he's waiting for a 3rd down in the 3rd or 4th quarter to unleash that magic. And so again, slightly in here toward the over for me.
Last one for me, back to the NFC. I'm going CMC, Christian McCaffrey, 30-plus rushing yards in each half, minus 130. So 30 in the first half feels like a lock. This guy has been a killer in the opening half this season. 884 rushing yards on 5.7 per carry during the regular season, not to mention 11 touchdowns. So he should get that done early for the first half of that at least. As a Niners fan, I'd like to think that the Niners are in control of this one as opposed to last week. So hopefully we're up late and we're in a spot in the 4th where we can kill the clock just by giving CMC the ball, more carries, eat up some yards. And the fact of the matter is that much like against Green Bay, he's going to have to be clutch this weekend against a really good run-stopping unit in Detroit. He had some big runs in the second half last week. We're going to need him again. So give me 30-plus rushing yards in both halves on Sunday for our boy CMC. Out of 10, Tony, what's your confidence, just straight up, not even covering the spread, in the Niners beating the Lions this weekend?
I'd say it's like an 8. You know, yeah. There's some concerns, okay? Aaron Jones looked really good, as we thought he would against that 49ers defense. I don't know if I thought he was going to get 100-plus yards.
You called that out, though. You called that out, Aaron Jones having a nice game against the Niners.
Yeah, you could see the writing on the wall. He was starting to get pretty hot. And so I think the Lions are probably looking at that and they're saying, we can do that. We've got a good offensive line. We've got 2 good running backs. And as I said, the Niners secondary is vulnerable as well. So there's a path here for the Lions. What makes this an 8 instead of a 10 for me is the Dan Campbell factor. I mean, nobody would be shocked to see an onside kick in the first half. Nobody would be shocked to see, a punt fake at a crazy time backed up at their own, 10-yard line or something like that, fake field goal. I mean, the guy has a very high risk tolerance, and the 49ers coach Shanahan, we've seen him be really conservative at times, including the end of the first half of the last game. So that does worry me a little bit when you've got a super aggressive coach against Shanahan, who can be really conservative at times. So, little concern there, but I'm pretty confident in the Niners.
You talk about coaches, reaching deep into their toolbox and using everything they have. I think we might see that with the Lions this weekend. And man, Jahmyr Gibbs scares the crap out of me. That touchdown run he had against Tampa where he stiff-armed the dude before he went into the end zone. He's a monster, man. I like that two-headed monster they have there in Detroit with Montgomery, but then Gibbs as, that sort of change of pace, more explosive guy. It's going to be something. Whatever you folks do with your bets, best of luck this weekend. Follow Tony on Twitter at Tony's Market Tips, or on X, I should say. I guess I'm still old-fashioned. And myself at Chalk_Ninja. And of course, we'll be back next week, but with our boy Ryan Hogan. I want to dig into that Raiders-Bucks Super Bowl to see what he has to say about that. Thanks for watching, or thanks for listening, and we'll catch up next week.